Good morning again.
Daisy, what do you want? Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ICG's Digital Academy webinar series. I'm Sally Alsop, the committee member responsible for our webinar programme. So this morning, we're delighted to welcome Daniel Singham from Yonder Data Solutions and Kate Dale from This Girl Can, together with my co-host and ICG member, Annabelle Phillips. Daniel is Commercial Director at Yonder Data Solutions and a member of the MRS main board with more than 20 years experience across commercial and operational roles in market research. He also chairs the MRS Representation in Research Committee, where he champions inclusion, representation, and better reflection of diverse audiences across the industry. After starting life as a journalist, Kate evolved into a campaign and digital specialist, and she's currently leading This Girl Can, Sport England's award-winning disruptive campaign to get more women more active. She's a strategic communicator with extensive experience in producing integrated behaviour change and marketing campaigns. Kate is also a confident and inspiring public speaker, experienced writer, and analytical campaign and content strategy. And outside work, she's a stand-up comedian and co-owner of the Queer Comedy Club and Millie Productions. Annabelle is the founder of AP Research, specialising in getting beyond the obvious, finding the insights that make effective solutions that make the difference. She combines social and market research approaches using creative research solutions, often with the seldom heard. She was previously ICG committee member responsible for diversity and inclusion, and she now sits on the MRS EDI board and its social equity group. So during this session, our panelists will each share their experiences and discuss the impact that getting a properly representative sample can have for the research effectiveness. We'll then open up the floor for a discussion about the challenges faced and where to go, what resources you can use to help to navigate this. So as we go through, please do write your comments in the chat, but we'll encourage you to turn on your webcam and raise your hand if you'd like to join the discussion. Otherwise, we'll read out your comments or questions at the end. So before we begin, here are some of the events we've got organised for you over the next few weeks. And please don't forget that we offer great value sponsorship opportunities on all our online events. So if you'd like to know more about that, then please just contact Lucy. And now I'm going to hand over firstly to Daniel and co-host Annabelle.
Morning all. Good to see you all on here. Thanks for joining. I believe at this point when I share my screen, I will lose all your lovely faces, but you'll still be able to see mine, which is fine. Can I just have someone confirm that you can see the screen?
It looks good.
Great, thank you. Yep, so as Sally said, my name is Daniel. I am at Yonder Data Solutions and I chair the MRS Representation and Research Group, which is very much what today's conversation is regarding. I'm just going to go through a bit of theory first. A lot of it is basic and we all know it, but there's a reason why I'm doing that and you'll see why. And I'll end with a couple of real life case studies. So we're talking about national representative samples, right? And we all know what that is. One definition we've been using for a few years is that it is one that has a strong enough similarity to the population of the country being studied. That results will be valid. So just one key caveat for today, very much what I talk about is about the UK, because we're here in the UK and the MRS, we focus on the UK. So whilst it is just as important in all other markets we work in due to legal reasons and so on, it's a lot easier for us to do what we might want to do in the UK than it might be elsewhere. So the question is, why are we even here? Why are we having this conversation? So the representation in research group has been alive, I'm going to say, for about 5 to 8 years or so. And over that time, we've evolved quite a lot. One of the things you're going to notice in a paragraph just there, it refers to a commercials benefit study, which was run a few years ago. It's still very relevant, and I will share that with anyone who would like to see it. It's very powerful. But one of the reasons we are here is you will know national representative samples can be defined in many ways. When you say to someone, oh, it was nat rep, the follow-up question should be, can you define how that was? If you ask 10 people, you are likely to get several different answers based on how one has defined it. According to the MRS Code of Conduct, when work is published, really important that you don't just say it was nat rep, but you say it was nat rep on XYZ. Historically in the UK, age, gender, region was always the minimum. At some point in time, social grade got included. And I have to say, over the last few years, quite a few, including us, have included ethnicity. So in the UK, we expect national representative quant online work to have a minimum quotas on age, gender, region, social grade, and ethnicity. It's not perfect. We'd love to go further with disability, income, and so on. But one of the key things we always say at the MRS is progress over perfection. So as long as we're trying and keep evolving as we go, that's the most important thing. When we look to age, gender, region on its own, obviously we are overlooking some of the minority groups who represent quite a large proportion of the population. So that's why it's really important as we continue to evolve, we continue to try and make it as more representative as we can. Bit of theory behind it is biases. When you get a brief, or if you are that end client that is deciding what you want to do, as human beings, we are naturally going to have biases in our head. Biases in our head, sorry. The way we grow up, the way we who our friends were, the stuff we watch, the news we follow, where we work, everything will be taught to us in a way where it will have an impact on the way we see and do things. So the first thing we have to understand when we get briefs is you may need to change the way you may already be thinking about something. And I'll come to a good example of that in a moment. But just remember, one of the key things is biases. It will definitely play a part in everything we do daily. And this is the first thing we have to try and understand when we get that brief or when you're trying to design the study or the methodology and how you want to make it representative. You've got to try and avoid having any sorts of biases. I'll give you one really quick example. A little bit off topic, but you probably all heard of the TV show called The Traitors. I saw a write-up of the celebrity version. Actually, not, it wasn't the celebrity version, it was the one before, but or actually it may have been the celebrity version, where The Traitors is all about trust. And as the process goes on, you actually get to learn more about people. So you might be able to, vote for people that you now know. But on the very first vote, you barely know anyone. You don't know anyone. You are literally just judging someone off the first half an hour, one day you've been with them. A statistic shows us that the very first people to be voted off were people of color, in particular black. And if you look at that statistically in all of them, it happens very rarely. And one of the issues with that was the person writing the article, who was a white person, by the way, it wasn't written by a black person, was saying that the word trust was the first thing that comes into mind with biases that are in the mind. You're judging someone off how you perceive something rather than knowing them. So just like that, biases are really key. So what we need to consider is organizations aren't going to get there overnight. We need to acknowledge the limitations and the research that we are doing. We need to be transparent about who is and who isn't represented in the research. And as I said earlier, according to the MRS Code of Conduct, when publishing work, we need to specify what is national representative about the work that we have claimed to have been doing. A lot of best practice won't be perfect, but it's the way we keep trying to evolve. We always say doing something is better than doing nothing, and we're just continuing to be better and the best at getting better at what we do. Why does this matter? Whether one likes it or not, the UK population is evolving and it will continue to evolve. It is not what it was 50 years ago. It's not what it was 20 years ago. In fact, it's not what it was 10 years ago. It is evolving. There are more voices to be heard. There are more underrepresented groups that you need to take into consideration. And, all of this has to play a part. But in the UK, it matters because the population has evolved and it will certainly continue to do so. But we also need to address some common beliefs. And some of those common beliefs, and these are the beliefs that will stop us from doing anything in life. In this particular case, I'm referring to research, making things more representative. But the first things that might come to mind, it will cost more to do. Demographics don't affect opinions. Ideally, we should be interlocking things like age and ethnicity. We don't know the targets we should be setting. Subgroups are often too small to analyse. Fieldwork's going to take longer than the time I've been given. Actually, you know what? We can't even reach those groups online via panels, so there's no point looking at it. Now, there is partly truth behind all of this, but there shouldn't be complete blockers to us. We shouldn't have these in our mind and be like, you know what, there's just no point. The message here is try it first. I always say, tell me what you would like to do. Even when I get a brief from a client, they might say to me, I would love to know what you could do with this. I always say, just pretend I could do anything. You ideally tell me what is it you would like, because that's what I want to know. I want to know what would you like. I will then come back to you and tell you, okay, from what you like, this is what we can do. Um, I don't like the blockers getting in the way of at that start of the brief. On the commercial benefits piece, which I can share with you all if you're interested later, one of the things we always say is people will say prefer not to answer. So on lots of things that are deemed sensitive in the UK, unfortunately, there's a hell of a lot of things that are deemed sensitive, from sexuality to income to so on. You do need to add a prefer not to answer. So you're probably thinking, well, we're going to get a really high percentage of prefer not to answer. So what's the point? Well, here is real life examples of the sorts of percentages you are getting across some of those what we call deemed sensitive questions. And as you can see, it is minimal. It is very small. People are very open to telling us what it is. People want to, we're living in a world where we're trying to encourage people to be free, be who you are, don't be afraid of it. So people are certainly getting more comfortable with, what it is. So why does representation matter? Well, it improves the validity, and I have a case study shortly to confirm that. Certain groups are missing, the results are not going to apply well with the wider population. It reveals differences. People can respond on differently based on ethnicity, age, disability, income, and so on. It builds trust. When people see themselves reflected in research, they're more likely to trust the findings. And now this is from a respondent perspective. And again, a case that I'm going to show you in a moment clearly shows this. And it supports fair decisions. Policies, products, and services and decisions are better when they're based on evidence that reflects the entire population. And just in the middle there, from the MRS, one of the things we've said is representation is especially important because underrepresented groups can be systematically missed, which can bias survey results and lead to weaker commercial decisions. So we are initially talking about the research itself, but what the MRS is also saying, it's not just about the quotas and the sampling and the sourcing that matters, it's how you analyze that data and it's how you interpret that data that matters just as much, especially when handling minority and major groups sensitively. So I'm going to give you just a couple of examples that I was looking at recently. I have two which I'll go into a bit more detail, but the first one was just an example. So product team tests a new banking app only with experienced smartphone users. The app may look easy to use in the study, but older customers or older people with accessibility needs may struggle in real life. Very basic example there, but that is literally what sometimes still happens today. Yeah, health study on asthma includes mostly one ethnic group or one age band. The treatment might appear effective overall, but it could work differently for other groups, so the results are less reliable for everyone. And the last one there, for surveys about a new healthcare service, mostly including younger, urban, digitally confident responders, which is typically what we see on online panels, it may look successful on paper, but fail older people, people in rural areas, or those with accessibility needs. Again, very basic stuff here, but that is the sorts of studies we are still seeing today. And you can see how it might reflect a certain part, but the groups you're missing are pretty big and very important. And the final slide, just on the theory, is you may have come across this, but it's the role of the doll test. And this was done in the 1950s in America, and it's about biases. Typically, where it was is a group of kids got shown two dolls, and they were just asked to identify the race of the doll and which one they preferred to play with. Down the bottom, you'll see where it said that the majority of black students preferred the white doll, with yellow hair signing positive traits to it. This particular experiment is what brought about the rule in 1954, bringing an end to legalized segregation. But the point there is, and I'll use myself as an example, I was born and raised in London. My parents are of a Sri Lankan ethnicity. I've only been to Sri Lanka once in my life. I don't speak either. There's two languages in Sri Lanka. I don't speak any of them. Being born and raised here, I'm very British, but I will still have the same biases as someone who is white, for example. People often think, the biases do not include people of color and so on. It does. It includes people like me. The way I was educated here, I was taught here, I see the same things we all do. I can still have the same biases other people can have. It doesn't rule myself out just because I'm a person of color. So in the same way, this is a really good example that someone as young as 3 years old was able to be like their brain was able to be worked in a certain way. So here's a real life example. I got a brief, 500 white people, 500 ethnic minorities, 10-minute survey. All we simply want to do was compare media behavior between the two. Probably a 10-day turnaround. So this is Quant, 10-day turnaround, a budget of, I said 4 to 5, that 5K there, probably could have been less. End client advertising agency. All they simply wanted to do was just see what the behavior is like across white people versus ethnic minorities and see if they're missing anything. At this particular point, I asked one simple question: how are you defining ethnic minorities? That's all it was. A bit of silence on the call, and they said, "Oh, we're just defining them as anyone who's not white." Now, I work in commercial. It's always important you keep your clients happy, but I took a massive risk here, and I just went with it. And I said to them, really quick question: if I walked onto the street right now and went up to a white male and I said, "Hey, mate, I just need to ask a German a couple of questions," and he turned around to me and said, "But I'm not German," and my response is, "Oh, but you're all the same, aren't you?" It's probably not gonna. It probably wouldn't have ended well. That is theoretically what we are doing here. We are assuming a particular group all the same, and we're chucking them into one bucket. And that could be the same with ethnicity. That could be the same with, gender or sexuality and so on. Sometimes we're grouping a few little bits together and shoving them all into one. By asking that one question, they went back and came back with a whole different study. Now, I can share this report with you. So EM down the bottom is Essence Mediacom, who was the agency. The end client was an advertising agency. I've got a full-on 50-page report, which goes into so much more details that I'm about to show you now. So if you're interested in that, do let me know. But one of the key reasons for the ask of the question is, I know it says 21 here, we're in 26 now, but this was more a couple of years ago we did this. But you can see the population is changing, and it has gone up in terms of the different types of ethnic minority groups. They're not similar, they are different. Some are lower and some are higher. And it is, I think that, they need to be treated separately. So they commissioned an extensive piece of work after this conversation. Note here, it now says 2645. Initially, it was 1,000. It has gone up by over double after they went back and had conversations about it. I believe the Qual was always around this number, but if you now look at what it broke down to, Black African, Black Caribbean, Chinese, Bangladeshi, Indian, Pakistani, White British, and Polish got in as well. This was never part of the original spec, but they came into it after we had this conversation. But as you can see here, the ethnic minorities are no longer grouped, but they are all split out. And this is why the number. Now, if you go back to what I said earlier, is it feasible? We could have looked at this and thought, yeah, that's never going to be feasible, is it? But by having the conversation, we were able to say, you know what? It is, and this is what we can do. So was it worth doing it? Well, so if we look at ethnic audiences first, we spoke about trust earlier. I said respondents feel trusted. They have trust in what they're seeing, and they have trust in the results, and they want to further participate in studies when they feel as though you are treating them, as who they are. So in this particular study, 71% of ethnic minorities said that they follow ethnic minority influencers over white British influencers. I'm not going to lie, I wouldn't be able to name you an ethnic minority influencer. I probably wouldn't be able to mention, name you a white one either. But clearly they do something, and I know a lot of people follow them. But is this an obvious stat? I don't know. Maybe it is, but you need the evidence to prove it. Is it obvious that someone of an ethnic minority is saying to you, I would much rather follow an ethnic minority? They had an emotional resonance of minority ethnic influences. It's stronger than mainstream content creators, right? So the point there is understanding my point of view due to similar lived experiences. And a lot of the times I like to focus on lived experiences because we've all had different lived experiences, and it is those lived experiences that make a massive impact on whatever it is we're trying to do. It helps them embrace the dual identity. I told you I was a British Sri Lankan. That is your dual identity, right? And it's authentic, right? So this particular respondent was saying, they follow these people because they align closely with them, right? They see them as someone like me, someone that may have been through lived experiences as me, and so on. So this was a really key and brilliant slide that I really liked. So one of the parts of the study was talking about media. What do you watch? Where are you watching stuff? So Netflix and YouTube were consistently in the top 3, and then popped out community channels. So I was looking at this earlier, And if you think initially we were trying to shove them all together, right? One massive group, great. Now, I'm not saying if the client did that the first time around, the data is wrong. It's not wrong. But I can tell you one thing, it definitely wouldn't have been as accurate as this, right? It's not about data being wrong, it's about accuracy of it. I was looking, do any groups match? And I think I found one. Was it? I think I found one. I think it was Bangladeshi and Pakistani were the only two that was similar. But if you then look between Black and African and Black Caribbean, um, it switched between Netflix and YouTube. If you then look at Chinese, they were YouTube, Netflix, community channels across all the top there. And it kind of switches again between Indian and the difference between Bangladeshi and Pakistani. And if you look at Polish, now the point there was if you group them together, you would not have been able to look at this in as much detail. Now, the advertising agency was saying that they know like how important community channels are to each of these, or where I'd need to go for a particular advert, depending on who I want and where it is best spending our money on. Right now, there is so much more behind this one slide. This is just one slide, and for the purpose of time, this is all I'm showing you in this particular one. But like I said, I've got a full report, and it's published, so we're happy to share that with you. And in here as well, when we now break it down to what we would call maybe similar cultures, some might say. So Bangladeshi, Indian, and Pakistani, we've looked at them differently. We haven't grouped this group together. Again, I'm not going to lie, I don't know much about community channels, but you will see there are clear differences between the three cultures here. Absolutely clear differences. It is not Z TV channel is the number one for all of them, or that Star Plus was the least for all of them. There are clear differences between them. And it meant that investing in advertising on community channels offered the prospect of reaching audiences not only in these numbers, but while they are in a positive mindset, right? So these people are choosing to watch these channels. So if you go back to the previous slide, we saw community channels were their favorite. And then within that community channels, these are the sorts of things they're watching. Clearly, it's something they want to watch and they're going to be in a positive mindset. And it was really great info for the advertising agency. Conscious of time, I've only got a couple more slides. In the end, this report built out 7 deep dives, not a 500, not just white versus ethnic minorities, but it was now a full-on profile for Bangladeshi audiences, Polish audiences, Chinese, Pakistani, Black African, Black Caribbean, Indian audiences. That all started with one simple question: how are you defining ethnic minorities? As a commercial director, I could easily have just said yes to that first brief, and I don't think I'd be presenting this to you today. But by me questioning it and taking the risk, it was, worth the risk, I would say. Finally, just on age, very similar to ethnicity. Age again in the UK, 65 plus, massive group. We all assume 66 and 86 are all the same, probably doing the same thing. Massive differences between a 66-year-old, 76-year-old, 86-year-old, and so on. One of the things we did that came out of one of the conversations we had in representation researchers here at Yonder Data Solutions, we have our UK panel, and we were able to trial 65 to 74 and 75 plus. Now, is that good enough? Probably not. But I told you before, it's progress over perfection. We have at least tried. So for the last couple of years, our oldest age group is now 65 to 74 and now 75 plus. And you can see there some clear stats of differences where if you group them all as 65 plus, it's not that your data is necessarily wrong. It is just that it isn't going to be as accurate as what you have here. Our next step would love to make it 75 plus and so on. So that was a quick stop there. As I say, there's a couple of things I can share with you on that, and I'm happy to do that. It's the commercial benefit study from the Representation Research Group. It's the Essence MediaCom full report, and it's some other case studies we have done. On that, I am going to hand over to Kate.
Thank you, Daniel. That's given me, I've got so many questions for you now. I'd rather just go into interviewing you, I think, or talking to you. I'm thinking particularly around that age group. As a 56-year-old, I keep having arguments internally about the fact that we have a tendency to pull together our women for this girl can who are 55 to 74. And as a 56-year-old, I'm very keen to explain there's a very big difference between how I feel at 56 actually, I hope I feel the same at 74, but it is really getting into that nuance. And over the years of running This Girl Can, the question that people ask is, what do women want? Well, we are 51% of the population. We probably all want different things. And I think really getting into the levels beneath. I am going to, having said I wasn't going to, I've got a few slides. I'm going to try and share my screen. This always puts the fear of God into me, and I'm not very good on Zoom. So let's see if I can make this work. If not, then I will abandon them. Ah, right, from beginning. There we go. Can you see? I can't see any of you now, but can you see the skill can slide?
Not yet.
Right, that's interesting, isn't it? Do you know what? Oh, this is why I should have turned up for the rehearsal. I am so sorry, everybody. Do you know what? We are going to try and abandon that. Let's see if I can do that.
Hey,
Um,
do you want to email me the slides and then I can share them for you on my laptop?
Oh, it started sharing.
it's
Oh,
I hadn't pressed share. Right. Now, what can you see? Is it in oh, I'm so sorry, everyone. I am slicker than this. What can you see now? Is it showing the slide?
It's showing the slide, but also the little banner thing at the
Yeah, is that
side. And
better?
yeah, that's better. Now
Lovely.
we
Okay.
can see.
Marvelous. Right. Slick. Very, very slick. Proving my age there, possibly, I think. Okay. So I'm going to very quickly, I'm going to whip through the slides and then just try and answer some questions that Annabelle's asked me to think about. But I'm speaking, I've been running this Girl Can for, well, since it launched 11 years ago, campaign, hopefully you know about behaviour change campaign, helping more women and girls get active by speaking and working directly with the women who don't feel that sport and physical activity is a place for them. Really proud of the campaign. We've had a lot of success over the years, but we have this real belief that there should be no woman left behind. And although we've helped more than 4 million women get active, we know within that there are large pockets of women who we are just not reaching, who we're just not connecting to, who face additional emotional, societal, cultural barriers that we need to understand more if we are going to help them manage, help them, and also think about what needs to change so that they are able to get active in ways that work for them. Um, we've used Sport England data for this. We have extensive data that looks into activity habits, sports habits, our active lives data, so it can really get into the details of it. And I think one of the things that we've had to do is get over our, if I'm really honest, possible squeamishness about going beyond that underrepresented. And I think there's something sometimes we are worried about looking at specific demographics or using those names because I think we're worried about othering. And I think sometimes that gets in the way. And I think Daniel's point about do something, I think has been a really important point for us. And really getting into who are the groups. I'll skip through the next slide. Part of the problem is this is what traditional, this is not a this girl can picture. But this is what sports marketing used to look like. Doesn't look like any of us getting active, I don't think. I can't keep my makeup on walking down the street, let alone doing crunches. But that is very often what meant the women who we are trying to reach now feel that sport and physical activity wasn't for them. And we know from our data that there are within women on lower incomes generally, that is, if you're on lower income, you are much less likely to be active. You face more societal, more cultural, more practical barriers, also bigger emotional loads. So really properly getting into and understanding that and recognizing that by working on the campaign, I mean, we're public sector, but nevertheless, we are probably not women, whatever our backgrounds were, we do not represent those groups now. So really needing to understand those. So some of the work we've done with Annabelle actually is really getting under the skin of women on low incomes and understanding the barriers, but particularly again from our data, we know that if you're from an Asian Muslim community, Black community, 55 years and over, as I said, or are pregnant with a child under a one, you are most likely to be inactive, which means doing less than 30 minutes of physical activity a week. And so we're really trying to take an intersectional approach with the campaign that's live at the moment and really properly understand, as well as also meeting the needs of disabled women and women with long-term health conditions, that runs right the way through. So we need to really properly understand. And that's why for us, working really intersectionally, working really explicitly, and really thinking about how we are working to understand the barriers faced by those audience groups from the inside out, not from the outside in, has been really important. And these are just some of the barriers that come up. There's obviously much more detailed report that goes into that. So surfacing that insight is the first thing, but then understanding how you respond and what you do to that is really important too. And I think that's where inclusivity in terms of our campaign development. So from designing the research, who we're talking to through the research, but that research design in the first place, then the campaign strategy development that comes out of that, and then how that's shared and which channels we use. We work with EMC as well, which channels we use to reach as well has been so critically important. It came down to this one sort of quote, which is one of my favourite ones from the research about our women who were trying to reach now, thinking that they weren't made for exercise. Turns out exercise not massively built for them, and that might be around the way leisure facilities are structured. Are there women only spaces, times? It might be around kit, might be around the type of leisure wear that we normally see people in, skin tight lycra doesn't work for everyone. Swimming hats, particularly historically important. And I'm making it sound like these are not really small things, and it's not just the practical impact of those barriers. And that's one of the things I've really learned, and I think it probably goes into this, come back to that point in a minute, but we have recognised that this is not just about, this Girl Can has normally been and traditionally been about helping women manage their emotional barriers. That work is still important, but what we've really learned by properly understanding the audiences we're trying to reach now and involving them in developing it, that it's also the sector that needs to change too, so that their needs are being better met. Because there is a real exclusion loop that, and you can sort of start anywhere on this, but of our women not feeling that they're particularly wanted or welcome, society reinforcing that, so you just exclude yourself. If you don't feel wanted, if your needs aren't being met, it's just easy to exclude yourself, and it just stops being relevant. So we're trying to flip this around to make it more about including, working with our sector to better meet their needs, valuing the community around that as well, so that women start to recognise themselves in the world for sport and activity. This is just some of the women we're featuring in our campaign. Now, the campaign, We Like the Way You Move, it's live now. So Nagwa, for example, it's a grandmother. She's just had outdoor gym in the park because she wants to get and stay strong and be active so she can pick up her grandkids. And really, I think what's really important for this is showing stories, finding the women who are willing to share their stories and their images so that they've got that real relatability as well. I'm going to stop sharing and just, I think, more specific, I'm going to try and stop sharing. This could be another whole trauma for us all. So bear with. Right. I don't know how to stop sharing. This could be interesting. Right, I'm just going to carry on talking and not stop sharing because I think that's easier about I'm conscious of time. I think there are a few things in this that have been really right, it's annoying me now. Have been really important for us in doing all of this and around inclusivity. As I said, it starts with the research design and not just the panels that we're putting together, but who's helping us put those panels together. It's I think there's lots of ways, and I can think of lots of examples where being more inclusive has led to different outcomes. We do every year a big piece of work around women's safety and women feeling safer to go out running after dark when the clocks go back. And we organise runs every year, and we work with partners to organise runs. One of our partners was doing a Let's Lift the Curfew run meeting in pub car parks, which is great. You don't have to go into the park. It's a real focal point. It's well lit. There's CCTV. Pubs aren't a great community and aren't a great setting for all our women. And that hadn't something that I had thought of, to be totally honest. So I think there's things like that. There's lots of different ways that being inclusive in design really makes a huge difference. We need and want to be challenged, and I think being very clear that we want to be challenged so that we invite that is really important. And recognizing, I think this goes to what Daniel was saying about biases, recognizing that we have pockets of ignorance, biases, preconceptions, assumptions that we have as well, and being comfortable with that so that we can invite those challenges in, and from our team, but also the panels that we've put together for this. The way that we've developed the campaign this time is far more inclusive. So our strategic agency has put together not just the agency who traditionally work with, but they've called This Girl Can Collective, which brings together our insight, MMC, which is an agency that specialises in multicultural marketing, as well as our research as well, through Annabelle and the team too, so that we are really working as a collective around that. And then supporting that, we've got two remunerated, and that's very important, but two remunerated steering panels of women, particularly from our South Asian Muslim communities and Black communities, who we involve, we work with, we send check, who've been spokespeople for the campaign as well, and who that we can check that what we're doing with makes sense and isn't hitting any wrong notes. And I think over the years we've all seen advertising campaigns that have tried to embrace multiculturalism or tried to talk about a particular challenge, but have got it ever so slightly wrong. And that's because it's work being done to those communities, not with those communities. So those steering panels, remunerated steering panels, are really, really important. And that principle of nothing to us without us is a really important part of what we do as well. And I think that's really challenged us as well. And I think through that, really understanding the channels that we use, and I think that the slides around community radio recognise completely and understanding which, not just which media channels to use, which community radio, which community media, as well as and how that connects to the broadcast media that we still do. And weirdly, one of the conversations I've had with some of my senior stakeholders is reminding them that We all still watch BBC. People can't advertise on BBC One. Bad example. We all still watch ITV. What is seen as mainstream media still talks to our audiences as well, as Daniel's slide shows. Lots of people still watch Netflix. So it's building onto that as well. It's not just a now we go to our community channels bit to reach these audiences, but also the types of messages that we're putting out there and the types of voices and around those, the role of social media influencers and micro influencers on reaching our underrepresented audiences. Absolutely critical to us, and really understanding the role of trusted voices of women like them, talking to them about what they do and showing how activity fits into their lives has been absolutely critical into building that success. And as a result of this, we are seeing that campaign recognition, brand recognition, and prompt interaction are higher than ever amongst lower income women and amongst most of our target audiences. We are struggling with that older age range, but I think that's because we are, and like I said, it's not just 55 to 74, but in 65 to 74, you go through lots of life stage changes, and it will be around, I think, where you are on your individual, I was going to say journey through the age. I'm not sure that's the right phrase, but we need to think more about how we get more nuanced with talking to them as well. I think the real challenge for us is accepting what we don't know and being humble about that, and then co-designing and co-creating and working with communities and working with people to develop this as well. And this is now translating into some real local, place-based work where we are developing opportunities to be active with community groups, with individuals that will then meet what the national campaign is doing. And this is tough because in a way it's much easier to put everyone in one big bucket and just do one national campaign. You can do it at scale. It's easier. You can show busyness. But if we're really trying to go beyond who we would traditionally normally talk to and activate, the only way we can do it is by being more inclusive in the research and the insight, and baking that inclusivity into the campaign all the way through. I have been technically incompetent. I am so sorry about that. I've talked a lot, but I'll hand it over to Annabelle now, please. If there's any questions, Annabelle, over to you. I don't know if I can stop sharing or we're going to be stuck on this screen. I will try.
You're not sharing anymore, don't
Am I
worry.
not? Oh, right.
No.
Anything.
No,
Send it to
brilliant.
my mother.
Thanks, Kate. So I think what we've seen from Daniel is seen, a real sort of case study about how challenging thinking has really kind of addressed the client's issues, that actually something they don't always know what they don't know. And Kate's shown as well how bringing that sort of having that challenging thinking and being, embracing as a client, embracing being challenged and embracing change and questioning has really kind of driven a lot of the effectiveness over the last decade of This Girl Can. And so what I want to do very quickly, and I will be quick because I really want to give everyone a chance to ask questions, more of the others than of me. I mean, you can ask me a question, but I think they'll be more interesting. So I'm just going to share my screen very quickly. Hopefully this will work more seamlessly than Kate's, I would hope. There you go. Is that okay? Can you just see? Brilliant. Okay, so just a couple of ideas about how we can think about challenging some of the ways that we approach our proposals and suggestions, but also some of the challenges that we might bring to our clients, because we get used to doing things in a certain way. Some of this might be stuff that you're already doing, and some of this might be food for thought. Hopefully it's food for thought. I didn't realize that age was going to be such a big theme, and so I'm going first of all with age. Yes. So that was going to say some of these things become shorthand. Age is another one that's become sort of shorthand for us. Just in our surveys, 65 plus. Like Kate, I'm knocking on that door, and I don't think that I feel like it's ready to be resigned to what I would call the 65 plus. Is almost like the research and insight bin. Frankly, it's like we kind of like, you're over 65, we'll just put you in that bracket. We're not really interested in you. 38% of our population is over 50 and 20% is over 65. So that's a fifth of the population that we're forgetting about, and we're just putting in that research bin. I was lucky enough to be part of that conversations where we started driving that right at the beginning and making sure, and then Daniel's talked about as well. So, and the big push from representation and research to make sure that people are looking at 65 to 75 and then 75 plus, but rather than just the 65 plus bin. And to pull some of that apart, there are big life stages. We're having to work later, longer, all the rest of it. And, as Kate says, there's lots of different life stages within that bracket. It isn't just the research sector. I think this is, so I've been talking to the Centre for Better Aging and also with our sign, they're called Silver Generation Insights. And but in the advertising agency, I just think this is quite interesting. 25% of TV ads feature characters aged 50% or older, and 5% feature characters aged 70 or older. But nearly all, I mean, 88%, that's huge, feel that people over 50, of people aged 55, over 55 feel unhappy about the way that they are represented. They're generally represented as in life insurance. And have you thought about getting your co-op funeral arrangements and all the rest of it? They're not featured as being sexy, daring, adventurous. It's very scary. So and reflected in that is the fact that probably the average age of the UK ad agency employees is 35, and when you're 35, you kind of think if you're over 50, then you're over it, really. So only 8% are 51 and over. In terms of our research, so we, as I said, we're thinking about there's banding. I would really encourage people to put in those bands, so 65 to 75 and 75 plus, because I would say 65 to someone who's 68 is very different to someone who's 78, but even 78 as well is probably very different to someone who's 88. I'm increasingly seeing articles talking about, we just celebrated David Attenborough's 100th birthday. People are talking about people being alive, staying alive till they're 150, knocking on the door for 200. They think that the person who's going to be 150 first is already born. This stuff is coming down the line, and we're getting older, and probably, need to be, thought about. Criteria. So they looked at the research that they've been asked to do, and bearing in mind 20% of people are, as I've said about 10 times now, are over 65. Only 5.35% of their work was asking for people who were 65 to 75. 1% of their work was people aged 75 to 84, and half, actually not half, 0.06%. So the tiny minute bit for people over 85. So that is something for us to think about. There is an enormous amount of money in this age group. There's an enormous amount of it. And what I'm really interested as well is that when young people, we treat every school year as a life stage, right? Every school year. Don't mix your year 10s with your year 9s, right? Don't mix your year 12s with your 11s. They're different life stages. But at this point, they're all the same. Chuck them in the insight bin. Okay, so there you go. So that's age. I told you I'm going to do this quickly. That's right. Social equity and social economic groupings, classification, class. Really, this is obviously one of my areas. So I co-chair the SEG group. Why are we still using this? What do you actually question yourself next time? What do you actually mean when you talk about ABC ones and C2Ds? What do you actually blooming mean? Because frankly, it feels quite meaningless in today's society. And I also talk to people like at Channel 4. They get so annoyed with the advertisers coming along, and they want to go for programs. They're aiming for ABC ones. Actually, really, know your brand, know your heartland. Is that really where your money is? Is that where your customer is? Are you just going for that because that feels like the holy grail and the sort of cash cow? It's ridiculous. What do we mean? There's two things very often. You can split it up into income or into more sort of cultural, societal influences and heritage. And when we talk about income, hello, we live in a world now where everyone is affected by cost of living, and it's getting worse as, the bombs fall and the prices of oil go up. It's all getting harder again. It's constantly, one step back forward, two step backs. So you could talk to people who are Bs, Cs, C1s, Bs, who you would traditionally think are your middle classes, but they have they have, and think of them as actually having more income, but actually, they've got more outgoings and their outgoings are getting higher. So actually their income, everyone's income is squeezed. So do we mean income? Is that really what we need? Or do we mean disposable income, like money that we've got to spend, or whether how comfortable people are? Because actually one of the things they say is you should really be looking at measuring is if your washing machine broke down today, could you replace it? Like, is that a truer measure of what you need to be looking for with your audience than ABC ones? Because I would say actually lots of C ones probably couldn't, to be honest, right now in today's world. So we need to think about that. Or do you mean type of job? Do you mean blue collar versus white collar worker? Well, that's kind of going out of the window a bit, where trades, you see the real escalation of trades, and trades being a really sort of like people setting up their own businesses and becoming really profitable businesses, where you wouldn't have thought of that as before, as when you think about tradespeople. So it's all different. Social cultural influences, do you mean that they're like what education they've got, or whether they have broken out of lower income and deprived areas and become very successful? Like, what do you mean? What do you mean? To match or not to match? I think this is a really good key one for Qual. I think very often we think, oh yeah, I can do that group, or I can just put in a couple of ethnic minorities into a group and then I've done my representation bit. Or I can, so why are you doing that? Are you just doing it so you can tick a box, or are you actually really interested in all those audiences? And if you are really interested in those audiences, then should you match your moderators? Because if you match your moderators, and we did this on This Girl Can actually with the Southeast Asian Muslim women and with our black women, and we got straight away so quickly down to the hub of kind of the feeling that vibe around the music, the encouragement, like what you need and how you feel when you turn up in a gym and a space, and that felt a much safer space for people to bounce off each other and to sort of feel that vibe and to get that kind of conversation going. There are times, though, I do think there are times, though, when a challenger, an outsider can be a good challenger. So it's horses for courses, and each project is different. But, sometimes it's good to turn up with less assumptions. You can be that naive sort of person who's going, actually, can you tell me a bit more about that? Can you explain that? So there are always kind of different ways, but it's something definitely to think about. And the other thing is there is so many resources. MRS is a really good place to start. On their site, they have so many best practice guides for all these different audiences. If you've ever got an audience and you want to think about ideas or ways or case study practices or best practice, you've got all the purpose groups there. You've got Pride, you've got Social Equity Group, MRS Unlimited, which is around disability and neurodiversity, Why, which Women in Research, Core, Colour of Research. You've got the representation in research, all the quant stuff, so a lot of the stuff that Daniel was talking about earlier. You've got places like the Centre for Better Aging, so which represent, they've got reports and advice and guidelines there as well, which is kind of designed more for the comms and advertising agency. And we've got the Silver Generations Insight, who aren't on the MRS page, but they have got their own website and they are on LinkedIn as well. So that is just some thoughts for challenging and some thoughts for ideas. Right, so we have 10 minutes left and we've got some questions, which is fabulous. So I would really encourage, if you could turn on your cameras, that would be brilliant. If you've got questions, I think there's only a few of us here, so it would be good to have a bit more of a chat and a conversation around that. So first question is for Daniel. What was the difference in budget? So obviously you had a big impact with the sample size and the sort of and the work that you did with them. But if it comes down to nuts and bolts, like what did it mean financially?
Yeah, so if you remember, the original spec was 1,000, but they ended up doing just over 2,500 completes. So just by nature of that, the cost almost doubled because the completes doubled by 1.5. So it wasn't necessarily that the study became more expensive because you're talking to certain people, so the cost per complete becomes higher. It's just because it was so powerful to them, they realized that they wanted to go in more depth to particular audiences. And if you stuck to your 500 ethnic minorities and you wanted to break it down within that 500, then you would have had very small bases of each of those different ethnicities. So what they decided to do is that they were going to up the game completely. So because of that, it probably would have been between the 8 and 10K mark as opposed to the 3 and 5K mark.
Brilliant. Thanks for sharing that. I do realize
Mm.
that's kind of commercially sensitive, so thank you. So Peter said, Daniel would love a copy of that report.
No
Um,
problem.
and so I don't know if you want to put it in the chat, maybe if there's a link or something. I think you said already that where it was, but we can also then I can put that report on this list of resources as well that we can.
Yeah, what I'll do
Yeah,
is I'll email it to you afterwards, and then you can
yeah,
share around.
yeah, and I can share this list of resources around with people as well afterwards. That would be great. Have we got anyone who wants to put their hand up and have a question? Got a question? Olivia has. Brilliant. Thanks, Olivia.
Hello, I was just typing it and then thought I could ask it. It was for Daniel, because obviously that you ended up with all the different ethnic groups, but were there actually lots of similarities by other ways, by age or income or education or disability even, that were coming through? Because I suppose I was just thinking the age thing particularly, was it actually lots of the over 50s or over 60s were watching similar stuff? And it was I don't know, I was just
Yeah,
interested
so
to
there
see
would have
what
been similarities by age. So, for
Yeah.
example, when we looked at the influencers, that was majority, that would have been the 18 to 34-year-olds. So there will be certain things that might have been similar across age, but the key was the differences between the ethnicities, which was really key here.
So it was the differences in ethnicity that was the key thing, but
Correct.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Because when I was thinking about it, I thought because you could presumably slice it quite differently if you did look at income
Yeah.
or age or
But the report I'll share with Annabelle and the ICG, who will then share it with you guys, you'll see it all in depth to whichever bit you want to look at.
Cool. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Who else has got a question? Have we got another question? Okay. So, how much are concerns, Kate? This is one for you. How much are concerns about security a barrier to women taking part in sport, for instance, running and things?
There can be a significant one, and it's the fear, right? It's we talk about it with our particular moment when the clocks go back, but it actually can be a year-round issue. I think during the day, and certainly when I have been running very sporadically on and off, if I've ever been harassed, it's been during the day. It's not been at night, but those long nights can be another reason. It can be just another reason not to, and also. Um, 'Cause it takes effort to get yourself out there, and exercise, movement, whatever you want to call it, should make us feel joyful, free, and strong. And it's hard to do that when you're looking over the shoulder or thinking about your roots or only got one earbud in or whatever it is. We know from the research that younger women and teenage girls, it's a stronger barrier for because that's when it's more prevalent. And in gyms as well, particularly, it's more prevalent there as well. So there can be barriers there. And it's just something else that you end up having to manage. So they are significant, which is why we use the campaign to support and encourage women. The more of us out there doing it, the safer we will feel. Though it does make me nervous sometimes. Something happens, but also to push for policy and push for change and push for societal change as well. Because it's very easy, I think, to think that it's just something we have to accept, but it's not. There's nothing inevitable about it. It's the way we've constructed our society. We're not going to change that with one campaign, but we can chip away at it.
Kate normally does the media rounds around daylight saving times when the clocks fall back, talking about safety and initiatives they have about safety, but also I think amongst the lower the lower income women living in more deprived areas, who we talked to, there was a lot of issues around. So there's a lot around sort of the usual sort of things that you'd expect, but also then they were kind of like, I get heckled. I get stopped. I don't feel safe. I've got to walk past this, I've got to go through this part of the park or something. So there were sort of issues as well that were kind of related to where they are. And then also when we showed them kind of pictures of someone running out in the countryside, they were like, but that looks really lonely. That looks really isolated. So there was a lot of issues as well around those sort of smaller
I
things.
think that's a really good point. I think very often, I think historically, when we've thought about lower income, it's been, and we've focused a lot of work on in the city, on urban environments and urban settings, but rural deprivation and rural poverty, and how much harder it is to get active there. So understanding, travel times, you can't go running down a country road. It's, there's not pavement, it's dark, it's not safe from traffic as much as anything else, but to actually get anywhere. So I think that can often get overlooked, I think, because there tends to be that focus of thinking that low income is an inner city thing, which is really stereotyped. But I think really factoring that into, sorry, I could talk about this particular thing for hours. I will not.
Okay, just very quickly, I've got so I've just consulted my my work colleague ChatGPT about the population, the spending power of the over 65s for you, Sally, and it is quite astounding. Over 55s contribute 602 billion pounds annually to the UK economy, according to research by Saga. Even after accounting for pensions and public costs, over 65s were estimated to create a net economic surplus of 23 billion. I mean, that's huge, right? Also, over 60s own roughly 55% of UK property wealth, creating enormous housing equity and financial security for many households. Although that comes from Reddit, so I don't know how clear that one is. I might
Sounds
take
about
that
right.
one back. Okay, so we've got a question from Neil here. Just to be clear, are we talking about representative? Neil, would you like to ask the question? I can't say it properly.
Yes. I was thinking more about economic representation, which is important, but being able to quota on something, you need the known proportion of the universe. So you can quota on something like household income, but then you can cut the data and look at it by whether they're feeling squeezed or not. So whether they have disposable income. So it would, Daniel, I mean, I'm deferring to you a bit about this, but it would be harder to put a quota in on disposable income, even if that's what you want to be looking at the results by, was my question. So are we giving minority groups a voice in the learnings and we don't have to quota for them, or are we talking about representativeness in terms of making sure they're quoted for in quant samples? Does that make sense?
It does. And the answer is it's a bit of both. So if you look at what the MRS say, they're talking about how it needs to be representative from, we need to think about representation from a survey design, fieldwork perspective, how we analyze the data, and how we interpret the data. They're saying it's not just about quoting something and in saying, right, it's all representative, that the whole circle has to be done in one. And we also spoke about progress over perfection. So you're right, there's going to be some that it's not going to be possible to quote you on, in which case then it is about giving them the voice and the learnings from that. But then if you can quote you on it and you know what that known universe is, then you can quote you on it. Do you know what I mean? Rather than just ignoring it altogether, because one way or another it seems challenging. Very much when we talk about representation and research, we are talking about it from the respondent perspective. So we are talking about it within the research itself, but then obviously that aligns with how it is designed, how it is run, how it is analyzed and interpreted. So you've got to put all of it together and see. And the most important thing, though, is understanding that it still meets the research objective. I get someone else asked me a question. If I'm only looking for women 18 to 24, should I ask 25 plus? I said, well, no, if you know your target audience is women 18 to 24, it's perfectly fine to just leave it to women 18 to 24. You don't have to just start asking everybody questions because you want to say, oh, we made it representative. So it is very much about the audience required.
Okay, so the answer is kind of both.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you're looking at age, you can set a quota on 65 plus, but you can gather exact age and look at the views of those 75 plus, that sort of thing. So it's both together.
Exactly.
Got it.
Brilliant. Well, we've just hit the 12 o'clock button, so I'm going to hand it over to, hopefully you've got enough questions. If not, you've got your questions in, and hopefully you've had an opportunity to ask your questions. If not, do ping me, Kate, Daniel, any of us, like an email or something. And I'll hand over to Sally to say goodbye.
Yeah, so thank you, all of you, very much for attending, and particular thanks to Daniel and to Kate and Annabelle, of course, for entertaining us over this last hour. It's been a very interesting discussion. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Cheers,
Have a
thank
good
you. Bye-bye.
afternoon, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.